Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to this Zoom call. I'm Brad Dacus, attorney and president of the Pacific Justice Institute. I appreciate you giving us your time and to participate in a very important Zoom call. Things are becoming very intense across the country. We're hearing lots of churches and pastors are contacting us. We're going to address a lot of the issues that you guys have sent to us and questions you've had. We're going to also, after we have our attorneys give some updates. Let me just say, first off, we're going to give you a brief update in terms of what's happening on the criminal side. We're going to have Michael Peffer give us some discussion about what's going on in the states, and particularly what's the different phasing that's taking place in California. Very important, very timely, and very fast moving. Emily Mimnaugh is going to talk about the checklists and also what's going on in Las Vegas and in Nevada, and some creative ways for people to have church services there in spite of what the governor has required. And then we're going to talk to attorney from our Washington State for the Pacific Justice Institute, Jorge Ramos. He's going to give us a very important update about something that has happened or didn't happen there. Moving on. Then we're going to talk to an attorney that we are really happy to have joined our team, Michelle Pine. She's an attorney. She is someone who is going to talk about our new office in New York and what's going on in New York and New Jersey, which I think is really important for us to have a good understanding of the kinds of challenges that you as pastors may be having to deal with moving forward. And then we're going to talk to Peter Mord. He's our church liaison pastor, and he's going to be talking about some very practical examples of what he's doing in spite of the mandates of a very hostile county in California, Los Angeles County. Let's go ahead and open up in prayer and give us time to the Lord. Father, we don't pray in pretense. It's not a ritual. It's not a ceremony. Lord God, we need you. We need your direction, Father. We need your guidance. Lord God, we want to please you in what we're doing and how we're doing it, our attitudes, our hearts, our actions. Father, let our flesh not guide us and direct us, Lord. Let us just have humble hearts seeking you and wanting to do what your Holy Spirit, Father, is guiding us to do right now. And we give you just praise and glory for what you're going to be doing, Father. We do not fear this world, but give us wisdom, Father, as we move ahead. And we thank you for that, Father, because you're a gracious God, and we can put our trust completely in you as we move ahead. In Jesus' name, amen. Now, want to give you a quick update. Kevin Snyder is not going to be on this call. Several other attorneys are not going to be on this call. Matt McReynolds is not, and some of the others. The reason is because they're working right now very intensely on some very important litigation. Ray Hackey is not going to be on this call. He's working on, we're going to talk about that, the Oregon case, as we speak. So these are tough times as far as making sure everyone's getting help, which is what we've always wanted to do. That's what we've been all about since 1997 when we founded this ministry. And by God's grace, we've been able to do it. But please keep us in your prayers. I really appreciate that, especially our attorneys, and for God's divine grace for them to do above and beyond that which they can normally do in their own skill set. But I'm very pleased and excited to have the team that we have, both in terms of their skill set and their heart and their relationship with the Lord. As far as the criminal case, that's still pending and still ongoing in the San Francisco Bay Area. It's dealing with the church and a pastor who had a service for Easter Sunday. It was a little early given the situation and the constraints, but nonetheless, this pastor had masks required, had distancing. This wasn't a rogue pastor that was just like, we don't care, we're going to trust in God and see what happens. No, he was very, very responsible, and yet he's facing criminal prosecution right now. In the San Francisco Bay Area. We're defending him. In fact, our chief counsel, Kevin Snyder, is the attorney who is actually defending him in criminal court. I want you to know that even after what we talk about today, many of you are going to be, you're going to follow what you feel called to do, but there's a chance that some of you may end up in criminal court. As pastors, your churches, the most we're looking at is up to 6 months behind bars and a $1,000 fine. Maybe you can do some good ministry work during that 6 months. I don't know, but it's a real threat. It's a real concern. And we at Pacific Justice Institute want you to be assured that we are not just taking on and cherry picking a few high profile cases across the country. we'll make sure that you get representation that will represent you without charge. Without charge. If any of you are criminally prosecuted anywhere in the United States, we will represent you without charge. And also to help us in that process, we already have attorney-client agreements to represent you without charge. And the reason we'd like you to, if you see any risk at all of any action being brought against you as a pastor of your church, I encourage you to contact our office in Sacramento. We'll get you an attorney-client agreement, have that done ahead of time, because if anything does happen, we want to have the authorization to immediately move forward on your behalf. I can go into the details of why that's important, but I'm not going to waste the time on that. Our toll-free, not our toll-free, no, our regular number is 916, it's the Sacramento number, 916-857-6900, 916-857-6900. I'm going to say it one more time, 916-857-6900. And I strongly encourage any of you, if you have any premonition at all that you may be facing that, contact us at Pacific Justice. We'd love to help you. Also, we have offices in a number of states. For some of you who may not be aware of this, we have more offices in the United States than any other legal organization committed to defending religious freedom, parents' rights, and sanctity of human life. We now have 10 offices in 6 states across the country, from New York to Seattle to Orange County, California, and places in between. We're here to serve you and represent you with a huge network of attorneys, in addition, that work with us. So if you know of any attorneys in your church, by the way, you say, boy, they're frustrated, they want to get involved, they want to help, have them contact our office, have them contact me. And on my direct personal email that you can send your request to, refer people to if you need help, contact me. It's prez at pji.org. PREZ at pji.org. Always feel free to contact me. I want to make sure you get the help that you need in a very quick and timely manner. And so it's very important as we move forward. Also, I want to make you aware of something else that's come up. Many have heard about this HR 666 that's pending before Congress. And we've seen some virals that have gone out about it. We had our attorneys research it. I was very concerned hearing what was going on about it. It doesn't prescribe the government to come into your house and take your children, okay? It's a program. I'm not in favor of it. I can see potential abuse in it. But what you do need to be concerned about is what actual states are doing right now. Ventura County came out at a press conference, and I saw it myself. This wasn't some fake news thing. And they said that their program, and they supposedly have more than 2,000 people up and down the state in this program to do this. They're going to be going through neighborhoods, predominantly through low income and minority neighborhoods. And they're going to be knocking on doors to give tests, which may seem like it could be a good thing. But they then said that if one person in the family tests positive and the other people in the family test negative, and there's not there's not more than one bathroom. In a lot of neighborhoods, older homes, craft style homes, there's only one bathroom. They say if there's only one bathroom, there's not 2 bathrooms, then they will take that person from the house and put them in a separate area by the state's designation, quarantine. We're very opposed to this. We're watching it carefully. It can be tremendous abuse as far as taking children from families. Social workers do this all the time, in some states more than others. The bluer the state, the more likely they are that they're abusing their powers. That's just a general rule. So if you need help in this area, contact us, but keep your eyes and ears open. We're really concerned about governmental abuse of families, and particularly in lower income neighborhoods and communities. So be very careful of that as we move forward. Now, I want to bring with us on right now Michael Peffer. He's the attorney who heads up our Orange County office, Southern California office. Michael, you've been working really hard to keep track of what's happening in other states. I'm not going to have you go through necessarily every single thing in every state. Things are moving very quickly. But if you can highlight for us real quickly, though, what's happening in states that you've taken notice of that should be brought to these pastors' attention.
Yes, thank you so much, Brad. And thank you, everybody. I really appreciate your encouraging calls and emails. And we're here to try to do as much as we can to advance the cause that we all live for. So I'm going to go through a list of states and that have opened, and at least to some degree. and we're trying to prepare a sheet that we can get to you, but bear with me here. It's good news and bad news. The good news is it seems like a lot of states are starting to reopen, and the bad news is that I have to spend the little bit of time to get through them. So if you would. Arizona has defined places of worship as an essential activity, so Arizona's well on its way. Arkansas has opened with social distancing. Colorado churches can be reopening, but the state is still encouraging you to meet to do by electronic means online. Florida, Georgia, Idaho, Indiana, Iowa, Kansas, Kentucky, Louisiana, Maryland, and Massachusetts are all reopening for houses of worship. Again, for each of these, make sure that you check with your local counties and local authorities for any limitations that they might place on it. Mississippi and Missouri are both open, but with limitations. Montana, North Carolina, and Oklahoma are opening. In Rhode Island, they're planning to reopen on May 30th, but it can only be 25% capacity. Both South Carolina and South Dakota are reopening the churches. Texas is open the churches. Utah, West Virginia, and Wisconsin are all reopening with the limitations such as social distancing and masks in some cases. So make sure you check that out. I wanted to shift over here to California, because what California has done is begin to expedite what they call the stage 2 reopening. And as most of you know, the stage 2 does not allow for churches to be reopened, but it does allow businesses and schools to open. And so that may present some opportunities. It may present some opportunities for each person to talk to their local authorities, and maybe perhaps you can get a waiver. I have found that many of the counties are saying, hey, basically, we're not going to enforce these laws. I know Riverside County did that, and there's several other counties who have said that they're not going to, and the sheriff has said, we're not going to arrest people and we're not going to ticket people for going to church. So the counties that are into stage 2 right now, and one more thing on that, I frankly think that that the reason why the governor has been moving towards this stage 2 quickly is I think he's trying to get ahead of what's happening in this state, with a lot of churches saying we're going to reopen it anyway, something that we've talked about, and PJI does not recommend disobeying the law at this point, and we can't recommend that at this point either. But let me give you some counties that are in stage 2. I think there's like 38 or 9. Amador County, Butte, Calaveras, Colusa, Del Norte County, El Dorado County, Glenn, Humboldt, Inyo, Kern, Kings, Lake, Lassen, Madera, and Mariposa, Mendocino, Merced, Modoc, Mono, Napa, Nevada, Placer, Plumas, Sacramento, San Benito, San Diego, San Luis Obispo County, and Santa Barbara County. These are all stage 2. Now remember, these are stage 2. That does not mean churches can meet yet, but we see this as a really a concrete movement within the governor's office, I think that perhaps it bodes at least some pleasant news for a change in California, and that we're going to be uh, hopeful to see what can be done now that they've moved into stage 2, and both legally and as well as talking to your local representatives. That's what's going on right now. There's a lot of changes. Some good things are happening. Some movement. Thank you, Jesus. Is finally happening, and we're excited to see it happen. And don't worry, PJI is going nowhere. We're here to help. We're here to push when pushing is necessary, and to come alongside when that's necessary as well. So God bless you all.
Hey, I appreciate that, Michael, very much. A few other points I want to add to that. In some places, we've seen some major pushback. For example, the district attorney office in Monterey County reportedly, and I talked to an attorney in that area earlier today, has reported that they're using plainclothes investigators, plainclothes, entering to businesses that are open that they say should not be opened or have been banned to be opened. Even though local law enforcement allegedly says we're not going to enforce it, we have reports that the district attorney's office there has actually plainclothes people going in and penetrating and then pounding with criminal charges. The reason I'm bringing this up is because in hostile areas in particular, like in the San Francisco Bay Area, you need to keep your eyes open for this to potentially happen in your areas. I think in what I call red counties in California, which is basically what he read off for the most part, red counties, I don't think law enforcement or the district attorney's office is going to want to bully and beat up churches and go in there with their informants, Soviet era style, and then, or China style, and monitor and then bring criminal charges because they were caught meeting. But it's in some parts of California, I think it's very real, and the fact that they did it for businesses, reportedly doing it for businesses in Monterey County, I definitely have concern with that. Also, I want to bring to attention what we at Pacific Justice Institute have been doing behind the scenes with the County Board of Supervisors. We've been providing for them actual model policies to adopt to give them confidence to more aggressively allow churches to open up. We've been doing this behind the scenes. I think this has definitely played a role in some of what Michael was talking about in terms of local governments. We have not been big fanfare. We haven't had a big press conference because that's politicizing it and making it very ineffective for our bottom line job, which is to defend you, the churches, and get you reopened as quickly as possible. We've done a lot of this work behind the scenes, and I can't even go into all of it, but we're doing that. And then we're also enabling one county in particular who's negotiating with the governor to have those resources so that the governor has some direction as to what to prescribe with regards to allowing churches to reopen and open earlier. I do believe that there's a chance. First off, let me backtrack. As many of you know, the Attorney General Barr has sent a letter to the governor's office. Those of you who may have listened to the show before or this call before may have remembered that I was hoping and expecting that to happen. I believe it possibly happened in a non-public way, and now it's at least now in a public way. And the reason this is real important is because the governor is on notice of the Attorney General's position, which is, and the Attorney General in this letter drew a line in the sand with regards to measures that he's willing to take potentially to protect the First Amendment free exercise rights of churches when other entities are allowed to reopen. In the letter, it was very well drafted. The Attorney General is parallel with what I've said before. He cited the different the cases that already come down. He says, yes, we acknowledge these cases. We have some bad case law. He also pointed out that in terms of the timing at the time, these were not situations and timings where you had unequal treatment. You had just about everyone closed. Number one. Number two, you didn't have the stage two where you had, like for example, schools opening up and places like that. That's what we've been waiting for. If you guys have been listening to this phone call, this conversation in the past, we've been very strategic and we're waiting for the right fact pattern to play itself out. And what we've said in the past parallels with what the Attorney General Barr said in his letter to the governor, so which was very reassuring as we move forward. And also, he pointed out that the other lawsuits, it never brought in the governor's plans, the forward projected plans to have churches have to wait until stage 3 and everyone else open up. He says this wasn't brought in to the litigation. This wasn't argued, which was most unfortunate. So he did a great job distinguishing those cases that were too early or were void of some of the arguments that should have been brought forward. And that is a clear sign to me that he is willing to support lawsuits that are well prepared and filed in the proper with the proper timing. And I'm very excited about where we are, because I believe that timing is becoming near. I'll just sort of leave it at that for now. We have also wanted to talk about capacity.
Brad?
You mentioned, yes.
Brad, I just wanted to add, there are, this has been a fluid thing in California with these being moved over to stage 2. And so we may have missed one or two of the counties, and we'll definitely get to our list and redouble that to make sure we've got everybody. But it seems like there's a lot of a move here and movement here in a very short period of time. So we just want you to know we're staying on top of this, and there's a lot that's happening really quickly throughout the country and in California as well. Hopefully we'll get some good news.
Yeah, thank you, Michael. Yeah, we've been staying on top of this because you guys want that assistance. You want that support. When you contact us, you want to know, what are you in stage 2? What can you do? What's your protections? And what are your legal rights? So we're staying on top of that because you need to know, and I want you to know you can count on us that we're doing that for you wholeheartedly. As far as capacity goes, there may be restrictions on capacity, 20, 25%. That doesn't mean your church can't be creative in how you lay things out, and using different buildings or different rooms and having video monitors and things like that. You're still able to do that, so that you can still deal with that capacity issue in terms of expanding usage of square footage for church purposes, worship purposes, as well as having multiple services. And we're going to talk about that later on with Peter Mord. And then we have also the fact that we have some great resources I want to make sure remind you of on our website, pji.org. Take advantage of those, including our checklists. And to talk with us more about those checklists, I want to bring on right now attorney Emily Mimnaugh. Emily heads up our office in Reno, Nevada, and works to serve the churches and the body of Christ all throughout Reno, all throughout Nevada. Emily, thank you for joining us on the program. First off, I understand that you work with the pastors to be able to petition the governor, I think over 200 pastors, if I'm not mistaken, with regards to not a threat of a lawsuit, but with a heart of humility, exemplary as Christ would like us to make a request for the governor to allow churches to meet. I understand that's been very fluid, very positive in some of the discourse and conversation. Give us an update on that.
Yeah, sure. Hi, Brad. Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining us. Here in Nevada, the pastors, and this was a grassroots initiative. This was not PJI pushing this, no other group. This was really pastors here in Nevada got together. One of the pastors who is here local to Reno, Northern Nevada, is also an attorney. And, like Brad was saying, he looked around and he reached out and he started a petition, and he got a letter before the governor last week. And that got publicity here, and more pastors signed on. And, I'm so grateful that PJI was invited to look at the letter and read it and comment. And, it was not politicized. It was not nobody's name, nobody's logo. Nobody's logo went on it, no political party. But it was a request from many pastors here, over 200, representing an estimated 250,000 Nevadans, went to the governor again today. And in that letter, we actually included proposed guidance and a directive amendment to let churches here resume services under safe conditions. And again, I think, with all of this, of course, it goes without saying that safety is always at the forefront of everything that pastors and the parishioners and everyone is concerned about. And so with in conjunction with that, like what was happening in California here, we've put together proposed guidance for the reopening based on what we're seeing already happening here in Nevada, at least for restaurants. Here, restaurants are open at 50% capacity and subject to other restrictions. And what we did was pull those restrictions into a proposal for the governor to mirror those for churches. And I think that goes together also nicely with the checklists that we've put together as a resource to you pastors for whatever type of service you may be contemplating. And it, varies based on, you saw what Michael was talking about with all the different states and jurisdictions, depending on what stage your reopening phase you're in. You may be having a drive-in service where people are still in their cars. You may be having an outdoor service where people are coming in their cars and then sitting outside enjoying the fresh air, or you may actually be in a stage where you're having indoor services with, careful social distancing and guidelines. And we've, based on your feedback, based on some case precedents, based on the CDC guidance, we've put together very long checklists for all the different considerations you might have in advance of reopening, so you can reopen safely and legally when that time does come for your church. And I know in the news today, we saw an update from the CDC that services may not be as high a contact and high as a transmission point as we thought. So there may be some new guidance on that, but certainly we are still recommending everyone follow the CDC guidelines for cleaning and disinfecting surfaces. And those are all included in our checklist with links to the relevant government guidance, so we can all stay safe and legal and, continue to act as Christians and faith leaders and parishioners. So we're very excited about that.
Thank you, Emily, very much. Real quick point regarding the checklists and all, I've heard some feedback from some women have told me that the idea of having the restroom closed for outdoor services or drive-in services or indoor services is not realistic, and exclamation mark, especially for women that have young children and the like. And so if it doesn't work for you to do that, if your service is not short enough, if that's a problem, in the alternative for those churches in that situation, I encourage you to have someone standing at the door of the restroom, one person at a time, or a father and son, or mother and daughter, family at a time, and be sure and go in and sterilize and clean the basic things, and then before the next person comes in. This is a very wise thing to do. And also, something else that we've assessed and came up with, which I thought was a really good idea. Some places like Nevada has allowed restaurants to open, not in full capacity, but allow them to open. And we've seen some communities in other states that have allowed this to happen. And so something you might want to do as a church, and feel free to talk to our legal staff about this, but to work it out with the restaurant before they open. Say it's on a Sunday. A lot of restaurants don't open on Sunday, or they don't open till 11 or 12. Work it out with that restaurant and say, you know what, we'd like to use your facility for our church service. Use it exactly the way that the restaurant would have you use it. So that, every other table empty, etc. The same distancing, exactly the same as the restaurant. And that would be I think, a strong position, because you're following the guidelines. You're not even eating the food. Although you might want to stay there when they do open and reward that restaurant. I think it's a good thing to do. But this is a really great way to potentially start your services in those places where they're not allowing churches to open, and at the same time, you want to have your service in a matter that is pretty plausible in terms of defense. I have a hard time seeing a federal judge saying, okay, you are not allowed to have your meeting there because food wasn't served. What does that have to do? I don't see the food making us any stronger in our immune systems for purposes of the coronavirus. So bottom line, it's just one of the things that we've come up with that you might want to think about entertaining. Also, when it comes to your choice and decisions moving forward, May 31st is coming up. It's going to be very powerful, particularly in those states like California, where so many churches, I think, are choosing to open up. That said, you need to, and as I've said this before, it's really important, we understand this, you need to follow what God's calling you to do. And as a part of that, you should be sensitive to what flank you're in. If you're in a strong flank, a good general, as I said before, moves out the strong flank first, early, to set the momentum, no casualties, very, and then the next flank moves, the medium flank, and the weak flank follows and plays up that momentum. In the same way with California, if you're in a safe zone, a safe county area, Riverside County, Kern County, Shasta County, there's a number of counties, and they're opening up, they're saying, hey, we're not going to enforce this. Or they have local governments saying, we're not going to enforce this. That's a pretty safe zone to be in. You can have your church service in those areas early if you wanted to, potentially. We're just talking about consequences. As an attorney, I can never advise anyone as a licensed attorney to ever violate the law of the state of California, the law that you may, of the state that you're in. Okay, got that said. But you can do that, and now you're in the strong flank, and you're helping to prep things up. May 31st would probably be the secondary flank. And acting in mass, there's a tremendous potential outcome for that. But that may not be for every church. If you're in a weak flank, so you're in the San Francisco Bay Area, we've got a hostile hatred against churches. You've seen it regarding law enforcement, and they've been very threatening to you, and or you have a serious concern for that. You might want to wait for a week or two or more, and until you can be assured that it's safe and that you're likely not going to have the action. You build on the momentum, and I think that makes a lot of sense. We're working with you each on an individual basis all across the country. Feel free to contact us for your confidential legal assistance and counsel, and we never charge for our work ever. That's very important. We're never trying to bait switch, bring in clients, and then stick them to a for-profit part of PJI. That's not how we work. We are here unconditionally to serve you all without charge. And then also, I want to give you an update on Oregon. Oregon, as many of you heard, Ray Hackey, the attorney who heads up our Salem, Oregon office there full-time, he filed a lawsuit challenging the governor of Oregon, Kate Brown, and challenged procedurally her ability to issue an order that violated state law. I can get into a lot of the details. I'm not going to do that for sake of time. But we convinced the judge that was correct. The judge ruled null and void the entire executive order of the shutdown, as applied not only to churches, but businesses. Everyone was liberated in the state of Oregon. That was fantastic. And then the other side, the attorneys representing the governor apparently had a good idea that this was going to happen after oral argument. And before the day was over, the state Supreme Court justice, the Chief Justice of the State Supreme Court of Oregon, issued an emergency stay. Didn't rule against the decision, just said, I'm going to stay the enforcement of it until we, the State Supreme Court of Oregon, rule on the case and hear the case. Well, I want to let you know, tomorrow, they are scheduled to have the hearing. Our attorney, Ray Hackey, right now is working on the briefing with our other attorneys. They're providing support for him. So please keep us in your prayers. It's a very important case on the powers of governors and keeping those powers in check. It's very, very important. So please keep us in your prayers in that case. He's done a fantastic job. Our team works together as a team, and I'm really pleased with that moving forward. Also, with regards to petitions and things like that, as Emily mentioned, we helped the pastors put together a petition, but we didn't put our name on it. We didn't have any outside group or any outside law firm on it. I mean, we were very sensitive regarding what we did in that regard, because it's very important that this not be politicized. This so it's not looked in some way of threatening, but it's simply expressing yourself, expressing your concerns with a heart of humility, but also firmness of conviction. And that's what we've been working to achieve. I strongly encourage you, as we go through these challenges and laying claim to rights, that we do so in a manner that is Christ-like, like the Apostle Paul in Acts chapter 22, lay claim to his rights, but in the most respectful way possible with regards to government and government authorities. And I think that we need to keep that in check. We don't want to ever have any churches, the way we do things, ever to feel like they're being used for some other purpose. And that's very, very important moving forward, as well as just strategically. Now, Jorge Ramos, if you could come on, he's our attorney, who is our representative for the state of Washington. Jorge, as I understand it, we've heard that the governor, you've had some success with the governor. First off, defending a drive-in service of a church, they were told that by the governor's office, they wouldn't be allowed to. We put the governor on notice, said they're going to meet, gave an invitation to come. No one showed up. And now drive-in services are very assuredly protected there in Washington State. But there's still a lot of intimidation, shutdown. I understand that the governor, I think it was today, was supposed to come out and announce that churches would be allowed to open or something along those lines. Give me the latest of what happened or didn't happen.
Yeah, sure. Last week, I informed everybody that there was a webinar, a group meeting with faith leaders in Washington with Governor Inslee last Thursday. He was scheduled today to give us information at 11:30 again, and he canceled at about 9:15. I had been in contact with Rochelle Davis from his office. She's his senior policy advisor. She's been helping with this, and I've been waiting to hear news from her. So it looks like she was going to give the news to us, to all the pastors of Washington, through a conference or through a conference with the governor on TV and everything. But I actually, as I was getting ready to talk today, got news from Rochelle Davis' office. A pastor here contacted me who discussed this. And I can report that they are considering having 50 people outdoor services or 25 people indoor services in phase 2. They are considering this very heavily right now. They're maybe going to have a meeting tomorrow, a governmental meeting, and announce something as soon as next week. It looks like, I did see a question on the side, are pastors getting the Governor Inslee's ears? I would say absolutely. He's definitely feeling the pressure. I've been in touch with a few pastors who are making great efforts. There's Facebook groups. There's someone who's going to hold a service at the Capitol this week. And if any of you want information on that, you can reach me privately or find my email on the website. I did also see someone asked if we would be able to sue Washington as Ray did. I want everyone to know that we were looking at that exactly at the same time as Ray was filing, and our Constitution and our RCW is different than Oregon, and we just don't have that avenue. We are similar to California and New York in that Governor Inslee's power here is more, I don't want to say absolute, but it's stronger here, and he followed the proper procedures to allow himself to continually renew it, at least the way it is right now. I think that's all I have, Brad.
Okay, Jorge, I appreciate that update very much. And if you need assistance, and you're an attorney, or excuse me, if you're a pastor in Oregon, in Washington State or Oregon, wherever you may be, feel free to contact us at Pacific Justice Institute. We're committed to representing you in multiple facets and giving you the counsel that you need for your particular situation. We're very sensitive to that. As we approach May 31st, I wanted to say something else too. A number of churches are going to be participating, and if that's what you feel called to do, so be it. And I think it could have a big impact politically, not legally, but politically. Many churches out there saying, for whatever reason, we cannot meet and have an indoor service. We're not in a safe zone. We don't feel called or led. It's not going to work, etc. I'm encouraging you all. This is our Pentecostal Sunday, folks. I'm encouraging you to encourage your flock to do something different or special to help bring in the revival, if you will, and encourage our other brothers and sisters in Christ who are out there. Some are taking risks, more risks than others. So it may be to have a drive-in service. It may be you're comfortable to have an outdoor service in an area that you are pretty confident that you'll have little difficulties in. I talked to a pastor of one church. They have outdoor services, and it's not what I would call a safe zone. Okay. Okay, technical difficulties. Sorry about that. Okay, very good. We had to change out the battery. Sorry about that. I apologize profusely for that. So anyway, so this church that they're having outdoor services. I saluted the way that they're doing it, in that they are using this to provide services in terms of food and providing food to the community and for people who come there and in their church. They're like an amphitheater. They're spaced out. They're following our checklist for outdoor services. So remember that. Have a theme of service. I think is a very good cover, if you will. It's a justifier that will help down the road potentially if we need to legally represent you in a criminal court of law. Just moving forward. Now, they had some threats as well, so that has been a part of the problem. But contact us just like that church did. We'll be happy to work through what your situation is moving forward. I now want to talk to our new attorney out of the state of New York, Micherelle Pine. She actually interned for the Pacific Justice Institute way back, I think 2000, about 2001. Okay.
Right.
Thank you. And that was a good while ago. We opened in 1997, and she had a great heart then. She has a great heart now. She has done a lot of litigation, and has also had a great communication with pastors. And actually, before this even happened, she would be talking and giving religious freedom updates for groups of pastors in New York City, the metropolitan area. I wanted to just sort of get her understanding as we've just opened this office. Well, first, welcome to the team again.
Thank you.
Micherelle.
Thank you, Brad.
Great to have you. Now, you're licensed in New York as well as New Jersey.
Right.
And those are two major hotbeds that we were looking forward to serve at Pacific Justice Institute. Lots of churches with different issues. Give me an understanding of what churches are going through and what their concerns are. I understand in particular that our checklist, our safety checklist, have actually had a real need, in particular with those pastors addressing their particular issues. Please say more.
That's right, Brad. Thank you so much. Well, right now, so starting with New Jersey, there are churches that are talking with their respective conferences about guidelines to utilize and preparing to reopen. Really, the objective here is to make sure that everyone is safe. And, from the pastors that I've spoken with in New Jersey, they want to comply with the state government, with the local municipality and CDC guidelines. And then also too, in these conferences, these pastors, they have lost members to COVID. I have to say that I lost a friend to COVID, and just found out just an hour before this program that I lost another friend to COVID. So, pastors are really concerned about that. Members have expressed their concerns too, because they do want to come back to church. There's a great desire, because they miss the fellowship of church, and like myself. So some of the suggested guidelines include opening up in phases, which may include like limiting the worship duration, also limiting the number of people who come in. One pastor told me that it's possible they could start off by having young people come to church first before some of the elderly members start returning to church. So that is a possibility. They also talked about having box communion. That's something, honestly, I'd never heard of before. So I'm learning a whole lot throughout COVID and what the churches are trying to do to adjust. But, there's so many different measures that are being suggested. It's just that right now in New Jersey, the churches are not open yet. They are preparing for that to happen. But again, the objective is to stay safe. So, though there's so many measures, once again, New Jersey state government gives the clearance to return, then at least the pastors and the elders, they feel safe to go ahead and proceed and plan to do so. In terms of New York, I spoke to a pastor this afternoon about this. Their conference also gave them guidelines as well, but apparently the conference is following the lead of Mayor de Blasio, and apparently Mayor de Blasio has been talking about the schools returning in September. That is possible that he wants to kind of lump the churches to return in September too. Some pastors feel like, our churches shouldn't have to wait until that time. They feel like the churches could return in June. However, again, as the New Jersey pastors, they are not going to go against the grain. They want to follow CDC guidelines. They want to follow New York City guidelines, as well as New York State. Let me also say too, in New York City, you got to keep in mind that the capacity, the churches are different in terms of size and location. So you do have some churches that are more spread out. They have the parking lot, as you were talking about, having a parking lot service, drive-through service. Some churches are able to do that, but then there are other churches that are part of a stream of brownstones. And so it's just not possible for them to do that. But I will also say briefly too, yesterday, Governor Cuomo talked about this particular issue. He talked about the fact that the government is going to be working with the Interfaith Advisory Council to discuss proposals for safely bringing back religious services. And so this Interfaith Advisory Council, they work with different faiths throughout the community. And apparently the governor has a number of relationships with these faith communities. So the governor says, you know, he understands the religious ceremonies are very comforting to people, but he also wants them to be done safely and efficiently. Right. So that pretty much the concern.
Yeah, I appreciate that and that understanding that perspective. I personally have talked to pastors of some parts of New York on the I guess east side of Long Island, for example, and where it's very low. The cases are low, the fatalities are low. They want to open up and they want to do so safely. Other parts in upstate New York, same thing. So right. New York is similar to some other states where they've got some places where these are relatively safe and yet they're not allowed to open up. And so that's been very, very problematic. And we at Pacific Justice have been working with both groups of churches, those who say, we don't want to open up yet, but that said, we want to prepare so that we can when things we feel comfortable. And others are saying, we're going to open up, but how do we do so in the safest way possible? Because in that part of the country, they have seen real fatalities. One pastor I talked to, he said 3 of his members had died. 2 were high risk. One was not. And he said, we still feel called, though. We want to open up. How do we do so in a safe manner? I talked to one reporter who said, well, you know, there's concerns that if churches open up that we're going to have these hotbeds and massive people dying. And I said, really? I said, that's really the very presumptuous that somehow churches are less safe than other places. In reality, if churches carry out our checklist that we provide, a very extensive checklist on our website for indoor services or outdoor services or drive-in, then that church will probably be the safest building that someone can be in their state. That is how thorough our checklists are to protect a congregation. And if they carry it out, then you can be fairly confident as a pastor moving forward. But like I said, you need to understand the risks are high and the ramifications can be tremendous if a church has a massive breakout. It can be a very bad situation. A church in Mississippi, I just found out today, you probably heard about this. They were petitioning to reopen. Well, the church was burned down. And someone spray painted on the sidewalk something along the lines of, "You won't be able to open now, you hypocrites." So we have to be very careful and sensitive not to give any fodder, any feed to the other side, who are opposed to churches and opposed to the gospel as we move forward. Cutting any corners do not even think about it. I strongly encourage you, to look at your situation in particular. Look at all the facts. But I strongly encourage you to be very sensitive to those who are high risk and not to be soft with regards to your position in dealing with those who are high risk. Thank you very much.
To say something real fast, just to say that the capacity of churches vary too, because with the pastor that I spoke from New York, his church is huge. So they can bring in people and spread them out amongst the church and it would not be a problem. Whereas other churches, you're packed in like sardines. So that also makes a difference.
No, it really does. It really does. Anyway, thank you so much. And we're really glad to have you on our team and looking forward to seeing how God's going to help you to serve the church body and the Christians throughout that whole area of the country where it's needed so much. There's the dark blue area with a lot of historical hostility to churches and ministries and religious freedom. In the past, we've seen it I'll just say we've seen it. And I appreciate having you there to help us to respond to it. Also, with regard to home groups, I want to mention this too. Some churches are saying, well, we don't want to have a service, we don't feel comfortable. And yet you're in a place where it's a safe zone or it's relatively safe. Then you might want to consider having home group meetings, small home group meetings. I work with a church, pastor of a large church. He's not ready to have regular services yet, doesn't have the area to have an outdoor service. So what he's doing is he's taking his home groups and he's breaking them up, the home groups. So instead of having 30 in a home group, or 25, he's having 8 to 10 and using it as a community outreach. I think it has to be fantastic for churches not really ready to open up. Look at your situation, but that's one of the things you could do to be supportive of the May 31st Pentecostal Sunday. But follow God's direction on this, and I want us to be united as a body of believers, praying for those who are opening up, and those who are opening up to be understanding and non-judging of those churches who feel that that's not right for them or not the timing for them. We need to be united and for God to be glorified through this whole process. Now, to talk with us about one particular church that did something fantastic, I think a model. It's actually in Los Angeles County, one of the most hostile counties towards churches and people of faith in the United States, most hostile clearly in Southern California. And Peter Mord is our church chaplain. Peter, welcome to the Zoom call. Tell us what you're doing this Sunday and what you were able to work out by having a good relationship with City Hall.
Yeah, absolutely, Brad. Thank you so much. And I've been praying for all the pastors that have been logging on because we know, as many of you have expressed even in the comments, this is not a political battle. I believe this is a spiritual battle. And we have to proceed with courage, but also with caution. And I believe we can hold to our convictions and principles while still using wisdom and prudence. And I would encourage every pastor, like are in my shoes. I mean, it's a matter of prayer, but I would encourage you to partner with your city and show them the plan that you're putting together that PJI is helping you to form as well. It struck me the other day, Brad, that 1 Timothy 2 says that it's good and acceptable in the sight of God to pray and give thanks for all who are in authority. And there are some in LA County who are for the church. I want to go out of my way to say that, but there are some that just ignore the church. And there are some in our counties who abhor the church. I mean, they are absolutely against everything the church is for. But I would just encourage every pastor to partner by serving your city, talking to them and asking what they're doing for all houses of worship. I also wanted to let you know that when you are praying and communicating with your city, I think you'll be surprised what they're willing to do. They've bent over backwards for other businesses and other things. I believe that just in the spirit of fairness, even liberal cities will do things that you'd be surprised if you ask. And so our city has partnered with the houses of faith churches in Palmdale, California, here where I pastor, and they are doing a weekend of worship. And over 14 churches now have signed up to do services right outside City Hall in our city square. And I just believe this is a great step forward. Social distancing, all of the things that are abiding by the CDC rules, but it's something that I believe other cities are going to start picking up and starting to implement in their city as well. And so, but I just want to remind you that government officials can't trust your plan if they haven't seen it. And so go to the website, or I believe Emily put in the notes or the comments the outdoor service checklist. If you go on the website under resources, it's the fourth one from the top. And what we've been doing on Sundays is a hybrid. So we do partial drive-in, partial outdoor, and we've been having multiple services just to keep the crowds and the cars low, the quantity of cars low. So that's what we've been doing. We're transitioning just like everyone else and trying to pivot just like everyone else. But just know at PJI, we're praying for you. If there's anything I can do as the pastor liaison, please reach out to me. And we're so thankful for what PJI is doing in the days ahead, as well as right now during these complex times. Brad?
Yeah, thank you very much, Peter. I appreciate that. It's exciting. to see what you're doing and the exemplary way you're doing it and the success you're having, even though you're actually in Los Angeles County. I greatly appreciate that, and to see how God's being glorified in that whole process moving forward. Also, I want to let people know that Peter is also working with Pacific Justice Institute as church liaison in a project we have called Church Finds Its Voice. And that's where we're going to be having breakfasts and gatherings with pastors up and down the state of California to educate them and inform them later on this summer, not now for obvious reasons, but later on this summer to educate them on and empower them on how they can have their voice heard. We've seen what happens. We're seeing it right now when a church's voice is not heard. And many churches, their voice isn't heard. Most Christians who are registered, only a minority are registered and vote. If your congregation was registered and voted and you knew how to do that and how to do it effectively in a way that glorifies the Lord, non-politically, that would be a wonderful step forward. We have some other resources we're going to make available to help shore up and to protect your church even more, all without charge. If you're interested in that, let our office know, and we'll make sure that we give you information as we bring pastors together in different parts of California. We're also working with Faith Wins, another wonderful ministry that is doing similar things in other states as well. Also, pastors, many of you want to minister to the sick and the dying. As we informed you recently, we discovered there were some pastors, ministers in the San Francisco Bay Area, known for their intolerance, the most tolerant community. Well, when it comes to people of faith, we've seen that, and these counties have forbid pastors and ministers from ministering to the sick and the dying. We actually went through the governor's office and requested that he immediately issue a statement that such activities by clergy is essential. He did it, and now if you have any issues at all in any way, shape, or form when it comes to ministering to the sick and the dying, that's a part of your right. That's non-disputable. We don't have to litigate that, but let us know if you have any pushback. We'd love to help you to be able to do that. Unfortunately, that's something that's very needed right now, and it's a wonderful, important part of being in ministry as we move forward. Now I'm going to go and take some Q&A. We've got a lot of questions coming in. I want to make sure we give sufficient time for that right now. We have a question here. It says it's suggested that what is holding back a number of states from opening is the fear of liability. Businesses, churches afraid of getting sued if an outbreak can be traced back to their business. Despite, are there any efforts you can take on a federal level, Congress passing legislation to ban any COVID-19 lawsuits being lodged against businesses and churches? I think that's actually a great idea. I understand there is actually something moving in Congress to exempt from liability businesses, but I think it's also important that they also, of course, include churches. My presumption with this administration that it would be included, just like churches were also included in the CARES Act. So that's something we at Pacific Justice Institute would clearly support. That said, as far as liability goes, first, many of you should have an insurance policy. However, if you're in an area where your local government, your state government, or your local government is not giving you protection, is not passed an ordinance saying we're going to protect you, we're not going to enforce it, you're fine, it's legal in our city, it's legal in our county. If you don't have that protection under your governing body, then arguably your insurance may not apply to protect you. That said, they still have to prove their case. They have to prove that they actually got the virus, that they got the virus from attending your church, and they got it attending your church as a result of the negligence of your church and the negligent actions of your church. And that's why this checklist is so important, because if you carry out all the points in this checklist, I think it's going to be very difficult for them to win that kind of a case personally. But you need to look at your situation and make that judgment call. Next question, any ideas, plans for children's ministry? Yeah, it's very problematic right now, because if you have second graders in a Sunday school classroom and kids aren't the most sanitary, first off, number one. Number two, they're not the most self-controlled, and touching and not touching. And they're already programmed to, they touch, they do things, they grab toys. It's going to be very problematic. I do not encourage churches to begin with to have Sunday schools, have your kids with you. have the parents have the kids with you. It's not a strange concept. Frankly, Sunday schools really weren't vogue into existence until the 1940s. That's when they really took off. And many of us, especially in ministry, as growing up, we sat with our families on a hard wooden bench in a pew and listened to the sermon of the pastor's sermon, and then we went to Sunday school. So I don't think you should. I think your church should be able to adapt to this right now. Moving forward, once this has reached a point where it's no longer a threat, either with herd immunity or vaccines, yes, we'll be able to get back to regular Sunday schools and everything else. But for now, I strongly discourage it moving forward. Have you heard about any restrictions to having singing during in-person services? Now, the worship team needs to be spaced out. I would have them spaced out more than 6 feet just to be above reproach in case someone makes an accusation they're 5.5 feet, and because of that, someone got sick. Just have it spaced out. And make sure the pastor in preaching has sufficient space in front of him and his congregation. Usually that's no problem because people usually don't want to sit in the front row anyway. I don't know why, at least that's what I've noticed growing up. But you want to make sure you have sufficient distancing. As far as singing goes itself with the congregation, I find that a red herring. And the reason is because if you have proper distancing, the 6 feet, that 6 feet distancing is for the purpose of situations where someone may cough, they may sneeze, where you have actual, larger amounts of air pressure coming out. So singing is generally is less than less pressure than someone who is sneezing or coughing. I just don't see a problem with that. I would see that as a red herring. I've seen nothing credible come out that as anyway makes that accusation or accuses an individual from not being safe because they're singing. I just don't see that. And in fact, theoretically, other places would not be safe as well because people could there's no banner saying don't sing in the airport. It could be dangerous. So I think you'll be fine on that. What should we do if we open for indoor services and one member gets diagnosed with COVID-19? Should we close for 14 days? Frankly, I think that may be actually a very good idea. You may say it may sound very extreme, but as an attorney, I will tell you, I think that's makes a lot of sense because you don't know who that person made contact with. They may have had no contact. They may have had, your church has proper distancing, etc. May be no issues at all. But the reality is in some churches, you're going to have some people who say, oh, forget this. I just want to give you a hug. And you may have that happen. You may not even be aware of it, okay? And you want to, of course, stress to your church the importance of respecting those policies. But if someone gets it, yeah, I would recommend that you would have 14 days to have that and find out who they had contact with and to track them for purposes of encouraging other people to possibly be quarantined. That's a very conservative comment and approach. Emily, what's your take on that?
No, I completely agree with that. I would add that there's also the alternative to pivot to a different style of service, right? So if you're having an indoor service and you find out that maybe somebody was ill with COVID, you could switch to an outdoor service next week as you investigate. And alternatively, I also want to add that OSHA updated their guidance this week regarding employers, not churches, unless you're church, as an employer. But with the hat of employer, they updated their guidance, and I would suggest you look at that. There is a mandatory reporting requirement incumbent upon employers across different sectors now, which there wasn't as of last week. So that's something to be aware of.
Excellent, excellent. Very good. Next question. Can a pastor be legally forced to give a list of church attendees to health authorities in the event of a positive COVID-19 case within the church? It can be attempted. I encourage pastors not to do that. I think that that's the state crossing the line. If your church is in that situation, contact us immediately. That said, if that happens and you have someone in your church who has COVID-19, then you as a church should be proactive. You should be able to tell law enforcement or the district attorney's office, whoever, that you have personally contacted every single member of the church and found out who they had made contact with or not, and let them know of the situation so they can take appropriate action and maybe even have testing at that time. You as a church, by the way, if you wish, you can have testing possibly made available and arranged as this thing rolls itself out. Potentially the first Sunday that you open up, you could make arrangements for testing to test everyone in your church. That's a possibility moving forward, resources permitting, of course. Does California have a phase 3 opening date when churches are included? Yeah, it's outrageous. Estimates are that the phase 3 will not be kicking in until possibly September, maybe August. And that'll be at the same time that you have sports arenas and crowded movie theaters. That is unacceptable. The Sixth Circuit Court of Appeals played it out and said that life essentials include the ability for people to gather and worship. That church services and worshiping is not an entertainment. It's not just an option that people can live with or live without. And unfortunately, we have some in public office, I would say, and particularly as we've seen in blue states, that seem to have that attitude. They don't understand that worship and faith is a part of life, and it's a part of health for individuals and their community. Mental health, emotional health, working through issues. And we're seeing the price being paid with horrific results. 600 pastors, in fact, recently sent a letter to President Trump, as many of you know, stating that we have a serious health crisis because people are staying in their homes. And so churches are part of that element. We've seen federal courts recognize that. We're hopeful that we'll see that recognized also in more federal courts dealing in blue states that we at Pacific Justice Institute are so actively engaged in. Emily, yes.
Yeah, Brad, I'm really glad you brought up that mental health component, because I think it's a great, another way that we've seen pastors, particularly Pastor Peter, who could speak to that, liaising and reaching out again to the community to get the church involved.
Yeah, and in fact,
Brad,
I
if
know
you don't mind.
Oh, please, go ahead.
Yeah, no, I was just going to say to Emily's point that several cities like ours have noticed the increase in suicides and depression and the number of people they've had to add to hotlines and things like that. And if you have any background in counseling or anything, offer that to the city. And I've been able to sit on a couple panels just helping those where people from the city called in and got some help. Great outreach, as well as a help to be salt and light.
Yes, very much so. And if any pastors have any pushback regarding their counseling or visiting with people on a one-on-one, ideally in an outdoor forum in someone's backyard perhaps, but ministering on a one-on-one, you give us a call. Contact us immediately. We'll defend your rights for individual worship and ministry. I know that up in Washington State, that there was a success up there defending, and we talked about that last week, the rights of individuals to be able to have individual one-on-one meetings and Bible studies and prayer time. It's very important. Any pushback, do not hesitate to give us a call, definitely. Next question, in low-income minority communities that have a person knock on the door and are asked to be tested, can he or she refuse? Yes. And if you have any pushback, contact us immediately at the Pacific Justice Institute. In fact, particularly if it's a social worker threatening to take the kids and they say, well, if you don't get tested, we're going to take these kids from you. I mean, I can see them doing that. I've seen them act like bullies all the time in the last almost 30 years of practicing law. So we have something on our website, very helpful to you and your congregation. I encourage you to send that out, particularly if you're in communities where you've seen particular problems with social workers making threats and taking kids wrongfully. On our website, it's a resource called 12 Steps to Protect Your Children from CPS, or Child Protective Services, same as social workers, and it's called different things in other states. But go to our website, it's under resources, 12 Steps to Protect Your Children from CPS. The same principle applies to situations where they're trying to intimidate you or force you to have testing. They may say, well, I need to come in and check out your house. No, not without a warrant. Not without a warrant signed by a judge. And just say, excuse me, can you wait out here, please? Because I need to make a phone call. I just want to find out what's going on here. And then give us a call. You say, if it's on a Saturday or Sunday, and you contact our main office, you'll hear on the recording, if this is an emergency deal with Child Protective Services, social workers, contact this following phone number. And that's my direct cell phone number, and I take calls 24/7 across all week, Monday through Sunday. Next question, should masks be required or optional? If optional, who should wear them? Good question. I wear a mask when I'm in public places. I understand the general rule is if you're in an enclosed place, it's wise with other people, it's wise to wear a mask. Outdoor with keeping safe space, you're hiking, you're doing things, keeping the safe space, it's not as critical. In fact, they've discovered that outdoor is actually much safer than people thought at first and originally. And CDC and others have talked about, it seems like they've recognized that. So it's up to you for your own individual safety precautions, but general rule is if you're less than 6 feet or at risk of being less than 6 feet, or you're in an enclosed area where the air is not being circulated or fresh air is not coming in, it's a good idea to wear your mask. That's the general rule as we see taking place. Yes, the next question next question. Should we require a temp check be taken for anyone attending a service? I personally like that idea. One where it doesn't even touch the skin, doesn't touch the person, gets near their forehead, you push the button and it tests their temperature levels. There's new technology coming out where you can test people from 100 feet away. And these are being sold. And if you're into the high-tech stuff, you can get one of those and monitor people before they even take the first step up to your patio area of your church. So, but I personally think that's a good idea. It's not legally mandated, but I think it's a good precautionary measure. It's not a fail-safe because someone can have it for up to 5-6 days and not have any kind of a fever. In fact, they could be actually positive with it and actually have no or very reactions at all. So it's not a fail-safe, but I think it's a good precautionary measure personally. And for liability purposes, I think I would advise you to do everything you can within your scope to protect your congregation. With Newsom's change regarding the dead and dying, as a pastor, is it possible to visit those in hospitals we have been denied recently? Yes, contact our office and to give your situation, your factual situation, so we can look at that and assess whether or not the restrictions or how they're playing those out are viable or not. We'd be more than happy to represent you if needed and provide you counsel without charge. If our sheriff no longer enforces the restrictions, which he stated publicly, but our health officer still holds to them, city police seem vague and non-committed on the phone, not unusual, then what do you recommend in terms of opening? Well, this is interesting you should mention this because in Monterey, there was a business owner who opened up his business, not a church, but his business. He talked to law enforcement, talked to the sheriff's department. They said, we're not going to enforce it. We're not going to enforce it. And yet, the district attorney office found out about this. They sent in plainclothes people, secret plainclothes people, to confirm that this business is actually open. They're actually, it's a small restaurant actually serving people food. And then they pounced them with criminal charges and multiple counts. I think three counts of misdemeanors, and they could hit them with civil penalties as well. This is a bully area. This is a very hostile area. The Monterey County, that whole area is just south of the San Francisco Bay Area. Santa Cruz is very similar as well. So this is a real issue. And if you're dealing with health authorities and they say that, then the next question is, are they going to report that to the district attorney's office if you're caught? What exactly are they doing to enforce it? You can even ask them and say, exactly how do you intend to enforce it? If you see someone that's violating it, what's your protocol? What's your standard procedure? It may be well, we'll notify the sheriff. Okay, then. If the sheriff has made it clear that they're not going to do anything, then that would seem relatively safe, at least from a consequences perspective, to take note of. Also, someone else asked a question earlier. They said, if you said that as an attorney, you're not recommending anyone to violate the law, but don't we have First Amendment rights? I say what I say as an attorney because attorneys are not allowed legally to maintain their license and in any way encourage anyone to violate the law, statutory law that is binding. That said, that doesn't mean that law may be deemed to be unconstitutional on its face or unconstitutional as it's carried out and applied, as in this case to churches. And it doesn't mean that you wouldn't win eventually in your case. We strongly encourage you, in fact, to contact Pacific Justice Institute because we're going to be defending you and we're going to be arguing the First Amendment. We are arguing the First Amendment under the U.S. Constitution, as well as arguing at other statutory provisions, as well as potentially the state constitution. So that is your right, but as an attorney, I am bound by the state to always never ever recommend anyone to violate the law, state law or federal law. That is our position that I am bound to take. That said, it's up to you to weigh the consequences and to follow the calling of God. And we're trying to help you understand those consequences as we move forward. So that's what we're focusing on when I talk today. It's about the consequences and you making the right decision as you see fit. Can a church ban people over 60 years old attend just because the government calls them at risk? Yeah, a church, you can do that. You can decide, right now we're only going to have people under the age of 40, under the age of 50 if you want. You can do that. It's up to you. And some churches, as was shared earlier by Michelle, that's very, very possible. Some churches are doing that, and that actually make a lot of sense. Having a place set aside for people who are highly at risk, with even additional spacing and protocol, that you may decide to do that as well moving forward. Question: do we need to ask permission from the county to get the church service reopened with all given guidelines, or do we just do it ourselves? This is for an indoor church service. Well, if you don't know if your county or local government is going to enforce the governor's law, then what we recommend you to do, in fact, I think it's just good standard protocol. If you're going to open your church, to take the checklist and that you've printed out, that have been resolved to carry out and enforce. You want to make sure you actually carry out and enforce them. And if not, then modify it before you take it to the local government and law enforcement. But to go there and give them notice and just say, hey, just want you to know, our church, when we decide to reopen, we've decided we're going to be implementing this checklist. We want you to have this on record so you know exactly what we're doing. If you have any concerns about this checklist or any additions or changes, please let us know. We want to work with you, law enforcement. We support you, law enforcement, and put them on notice ahead of time. It actually helps you, because then if they act unreasonably down the road, one of the things that we can bring up in your defense is, hey, weren't you provided this checklist? And didn't they provided this? In fact, they said that if you have any problems with it and want to have any changes, they're open to make even changes on the checklist. You didn't contact them, did you? But you did receive this checklist. And even with this checklist, and I'm going to go, as an attorney, we'd say, okay, let's go through this checklist to see what you were put on notice of, all the things they were doing. So after you go all this checklist, you decided to have a SWAT team come in and do da-da-da-da-da. I'm just saying it's a nice tool for your defense. So what is the liability for the pastor and his wife personally if someone gets COVID-19 at the church? We have one of our attorneys. I've been hogging all these questions, and I don't want to do that the whole time. So Emily, would you like to take that one? Oh, Emily?
Oh, there we go.
Okay, yes.
Personal liability, I'm not sure if you're intending to draw the distinction between personal liability versus church liability. If that's what you're driving at, that's a question of effectively piercing the corporate veil, if that is how your church is structured. So that will depend, as Brad isn't an expert on church structuring, but basically, if you are going to be held personally liable, it will be a civil lawsuit. It will, have the same standards of proof as any other. And that will really come down to a question of negligence, either for your church or for you. And the standards of proof may be difficult, maybe not. However, if you are sued, if you do end up in court, regardless of the outcome, you want to make sure your insurance carrier is going to cover you, cover that lawsuit. And, you want to have the best defense possible, because, obviously we don't want to be in that situation, but if you are, you want to be covered.
Very good. I appreciate that, Emily. Thank you very much. I want to be very sensitive to your time moving forward. Needless to say, you as a pastor need to decide for yourself what you're going to do, what kind of service you're going to have, when you're going to have it. Most importantly, recognize that we're here to serve you. We're here to do what you need and to meet your needs at Pacific Justice Institute. We want to make sure no one's left on the side of the road anywhere in the United States. So if you ever need assistance, contact us at Pacific Justice. Once again, take a look and utilize our checklist. Utilize our model invitations when you want to invite people back to church. We strongly recommend that. And take advantage of all the other resources we have as well. Some of you may want to start church homeschool co-ops. Once again, we've talked about that before. It's a great resource we have talking about that. Great ministry opportunity to reach out and through that and through home groups and other methodology. If you have some creative method of having a church service, we talked about going into restaurants and arranging for that ahead of time. Feel free to run it by us as well. Finally, I want you to be praying for us at the Pacific Justice Institute. And I don't just say that rhetorically as a matter of good, standard ritual, pray for us. I really mean it. We at Pacific Justice right now are engaging in some very serious battles, some very serious cases, and we need your prayer support as we move forward. I can't at this time, I can't at this time go into any more information than that. But please keep us in your prayers as we move forward aggressively. We have things pending in a number of states, working with attorneys in a number of states. We want to make sure that everyone in the body of Christ gets the protection they need and they can do what God's called them to do moving forward. As you open your church, just remember, the stakes are very high. You want to not forsake the congregating together. At the same time, you also don't want to have one of your church members die because of something you did or didn't do. We get that. So pray about this, seek God's direction, and I'm excited to see what God's going to do as we seek revival moving forward. It's in hard times that where the greatest challenges are, where I see often God do the greatest miracles and the greatest revival. And that is what we've been wanting. That's what we've been praying for in this country. And I see the great opportunity coming forward for us to do just that and to tighten and affirm the body of Christ. I also encourage you, once again, be in close contact no matter what you do with your church members, those who have needs, but also see how they're doing, have your elders be in contact, phone calls, Zoom meetings, etc. Don't forsake the congregating together as best you can. Maintain that interaction, that contact. There's a lot of depression. There's a lot of suicide. Alcohol abuse, alcohol consumption is up 55%. 55%. So God's given us in ministry the job to do that. It's not the government. So do not forsake that. And if we can ever serve you in any way, shape, or form at Pacific Justice Institute, we're committed to do that. Next week, we're going to have another update. Things are moving very, very quickly. I think we're going to have some very good positive news, hopefully, to report next week. And I'm looking forward to addressing and working with all of you and serving you all in the days ahead. On behalf of the Pacific Justice Institute, move forward and keep the faith.